Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra POLYAKOVA. I'm an assistant professor at Toulouse Business School, and welcome to my presentation. So let me first share my screen. I hope you can see my screen and everything is fine. So today I'm going to present you the project, which has been of my interest for some years. I'm going to talk about the idea of psychological entitlement and resource consumption. I'm doing this project with my colleague from Toulouse Business School, Camilla Barbarossa. Before I move on to the project, I would like to present myself and say a few words about my work and my research interests. So, as I already mentioned, my name is Alexandra POLYAKOVA. I'm currently working in Toulouse Business School, and before I was working at the University of Sussex in the UK. I got my PhD from Bocconi University in Italy, and my main research interests are consumer entitlement. So basically, that's my main research interest, and my PhD was focused on that. I have many research projects on this topic, and I find this topic truly fascinating for marketing. So today I'm going to share the project on this topic. I'm also interested in various consumer emotions, in different aspects of unethical behavior. Especially, I'm interested in looking in different aspects of all those three topics within the domain of services marketing. More recently, I also got interested in various technology and services. So, for example, just this year, published a paper on virtual influences. And generally, I publish in such journals as European Journal of Marketing, Marketing Letters, Industrial Marketing Management, Journal of Marketing Management, and hopefully some others, which are in the process of review. So coming back to the current project, the idea of this project is that over time we hear those messages, like the messages that you see on the screen more and more often. So the idea that humans are using more resources that planet can restore, that humanity is taking too much of the resources, like we hear that all the time from different sources. And there's lots of empirical evidence coming from lots of scientific research. There is lots of discussion on that on the mass media, on social media. At the same time, it's difficult to imagine the change in human consumption without governmental intervention. So government around the world, they're using behavioral science to improve and to nudge more sustainable human behavior. So here you see some examples of the messages from the government around the world that also try to decrease unsustainable consumption. And the idea is that the consumption has to become more frugal. So humanity, people, consumers, they need to minimize waste and think more about their sustainable and thoughtful consumption. However, what we see based on those messages and based on all the programs that governments have been consistently implementing, we see that, for example, this graph is from 2022. So this was in the beginning of the time when the the war between Russia and Ukraine started. And if you remember at that time, the EU government predicted that the consumption of resources had to be cut dramatically. And the idea was that consumers had to behave in a very sustainable manner. However, what we saw in reality was that, yes, the energy consumption dropped, but the drop was really, really insignificant, indicating that probably there are other factors that influence energy consumption, apart from, of course, messages from the government. So the idea is what we're looking at in this paper is a personality factor that influences the way people respond to resource scarcity and to those messages and to the idea that our consumption has to be more sustainable. And for example, there was a paper from Efron and Miller who found that when participants were given the feeling of entitlement to a resource, they actually felt like they deserve this resource more, and they consumed the scarce commodity more. So here comes the main idea of this paper, that entitlement, actually this feeling of entitlement, is one or might be one of the key predictor of unsustainable consumption. So what is entitlement? Let me spend a few words talking about this variable, this idea. So there is lots of research, lots of social media discussing that entitlement culture is very widespread. So here you see some examples of um, social media campaigns, of promotional campaigns that actually trigger this feeling of entitlement. So one of the most famous example is the famous L'Oreal campaign, Because You're Worth It, but there are many, many others where these feelings of deservedness, this feeling of specialness, they are highlighted. And let me give you a background of entitlement. So the official definition is that it's a feeling of deserving more than others. And the idea is that people, they expect special privileges, exemptions from what is considered to be normal. They don't want to be equal to others. They feel that they're more special than others. And there is lots of research demonstrating that entitlement has a very negative impact on social behavior. So entitled people, they're more aggressive, they are less likely to help others in different tasks, they're more likely to expect special treatment, for example, in retail environments, and they're much more likely to behave opportunistically. Surprisingly, in the time when we see lots of evidence of entitlement across the fields, such as psychology, sociology, and other fields, we see very little discussion about actually how entitlement translates into environmental behavior. And there is so far just one paper, the one that I cite here, the paper by Arnocchi. In 2020, there was just one study that showed that entitlement negatively correlates with pro-environmental attitudes and positively correlates with resource exploitation. However, this was just one study based on the sample of undergraduates. The number of people was not that high. So basically, apart from that, we don't know anything actually about how entitled people behave in relation to the environment and what are their thoughts about sustainable behavior. Theoretically speaking, we know that those people, they are very selfish, so it might be reasonable to expect that they are not very eco-friendly. However, as I said, we don't have much evidence about that. So thus, in the current project, we look at how entitlement influences frugal consumption. And the main research question, the main research focus of this project is how entitlement influences frugal resource consumption, especially in the time when frugality is highlighted, like in those messages that I mentioned before. And in the situation when we all know that we need to be very careful about our resource consumption. So the question is, do more entitled people consume scarce resources more? As I mentioned before, we're specifically interested in the situations of scarcity. And the other question that we're interested in is whether it's possible to reverse or limit this effect. So we explored those questions in 4 studies. So in the first study, we look at water conservation. We ran with this study in the summer of 2023, which was officially recorded as one of the warmest summers ever. The second study, we looked at the household electricity use, and we looked at the consumption of electricity in winter 2022-23. In the next study, we also looked at how people read the messages from the government and how they react on those messages that ask them to focus more on energy conservation. And finally, in study 4, we look at the ways to reverse these, the effect that we found. So let's start with study 1. In this study, we collected data in 4 US states during one of the hottest weeks of the 2023 summer. So we looked at specifically like at the weather forecast predictions, and we collected the data using Prolific, focusing specifically on participants located in those states. So the measures were the independent variable was the psychological entitlement scale. I will show you the scale on the next slide. And the dependent variable was the self-reported measure of water consumption. So we asked about the showering time, the frequency, and also the general water consumption, like usage of towels, brushing teeth, using the dishwasher in eco-friendly mode, which basically, out of all those measures, we created the general measure of water consumption. And we also collected data about the green consumers value scale and financial worry scale. Here, as I promised, I demonstrate the psychological entitlement scale. So this is a widely used measure of entitlement. And here you see various items that measure this feeling of specialness and deservedness. And my favorite item here is, if I were on the Titanic, I would deserve to be on the first lifeboat. However, other items, I think they're also interesting too. So participants, basically, they completed the scale, and then they proceeded to the self-reported measure of water consumption. And we ran a regression analysis that revealed that high entitlement was significantly associated with lower water saving efforts. So you see the beta, it's negative and significant. And this relationship remains significant even after controlling for age, gender, green values, financial concerns, socioeconomic status. So this is one of the first evidence that actually shows that entitlement predicts reduced conservation efforts. However, as I already mentioned, the dependent variable was the self-reported measure. That's why for us it was specifically interesting to look at the real consumption results, at the bills of people, of participants of our experiment. That was the experiment 2. So we collected the data in a very interesting period of time. So our participants were UK prolific participants. And we collected data during the 22-23 winter. If you remember well, it was the first winter after the start of the war, when the gas and general energy supplies were restricted from Russia due to the start of the war. And there were lots and lots of concerns and lots of stress around this fact that there won't be enough resources for people, like energy resources for people to use in the winter. So governments produced multiple messages highlighting the message that consumers need to save energy and save resources. So the design was the same. So the independent variable was ecological entitlement. What is interesting, at least I believe what is interesting here, is the fact that the dependent variable were actual bills of energy consumption during this winter of 22-23. So what we did, we asked participants to upload the bills, of course, without providing any sensitive information, but we really wanted to see the number on their actual bill to understand their actual consumption. And at the same time, we also had multiple control variables, such as, for example, type of heating, working from home habits, number of people living in the apartment, money attitude scales, in case participants were very worried about about the fact that energy would become higher. Like price of energy would become higher. So we had multiple control variables to make sure that we capture actual consumption and not any other related to this consumption worries of people, like worries about whether they are able to pay for that, whether they have big number of people in the apartment, or for example, if they have some minors or the elderly living in the apartment. So we tried to capture all this information. And what we find, again, the result is the same. So we consistently find that entitlement significantly predict increased actual electricity consumption. So you see the relationship, it's like the beta is 0.20, the P coefficient is significant. And this relationship remains significant even after controlling for household demographics, pro-environmental attitudes, heating types, and many other factors that we control for. And this was a very interesting finding, as we believe so, because we saw that even in the situation when the concerns about energy consumption was really high, as I mentioned, it was in the winter. The data collection happened during the winter when multiple people saw various messages from the government regarding energy preservation. Still, people who are high in entitlement, they used more electricity regardless of those messages. So which is a very interesting finding, we believe, because this shows that basically people, they don't entitled people, they don't care about those messages too much. Next, in study 3, we actually wanted to look at this idea of how people respond to the messages from the government in more detail. So we collected data during the last winter 2024-25, again in the UK. So the procedure was the same. In the beginning, participants completed the psychological entitlement scale. And after that, they read the following scenario. So they were asked, they were told that, okay, you see the message from the government, so please carefully read the following scenario. And the view was, the dependent variable question was, I will not follow the governmental suggestions to keep the temperature at home below 19 degrees of Celsius. This was reversed. So what was the message? The message was, of course, it was longer, but the most important part was that, the message, it described the political situation in the world. And it was saying that considering latest political developments, there is a high possibility of disruptions to gas and electricity supplies. And the idea is that in order to make sure that everyone has enough energy supply, the UK government urges households to limit indoor temperature to a maximum of 90 degrees Celsius. And once again, the review was whether participants will follow or not this suggestion. And the regression analysis again confirmed that entitlement significantly predicted non-compliance with conservation guidelines. So those people who are higher in entitlement, basically they were more likely to report that they're not going to follow the governmental suggestions. This relationship remains significant when we again control for multiple of other variables such as energy usage habits, political orientation, and many others, which I'm not discussing in detail now due to the time limitation. But we, in every study, we try to make sure that we control for a bunch of other factors that might potentially alter or alter the energy consumption. So what we saw in this study is that our results, they support our idea that entitlement reduces compliance to energy-saving behaviors. Entitlement reduces the likelihood of people following governmental suggestions when those suggestions explicitly ask to decrease energy consumption. So far we demonstrated that entitlement is associated with increased resources consumption, whether they're water resources or energy resources. And this relationship was significant, regardless the messages urging people to consume less. And what we were interested in is whether it is possible to reduce this relationship and actually to nudge entitled individuals in order to behave in a more eco-friendly manner. So that's why we also conducted study 4, where we tried to explore some interventions to mitigate the entitlement effect. So as in study 3, again, we collected the data in the UK. The prolific participants, they again first completed the entitlement scale. And after that, participants read a scenario about the UK government energy saving program. And they were told that they were randomly assigned to a program that was unique versus common energy saving program. I will show you on the next slide this message. And the dependent variable here was, I'm glad to participate in the government energy saving experiment to keep my home below 90 degrees of Celsius. So here you see the scenario. So as I said, participants were randomly put into unique or common condition. So unique condition said, congratulations, you have been specifically selected among thousands of UK households to take participant in the important initiative that promotes mindful energy consumption. And this is a unique opportunity to be a part of shaping more sustainable and secure energy future for the country. So that was the unique condition that basically highlighted this idea of specialness, the idea of uniqueness, the thing that entitled participants actually crave for. And in the common condition, it was basically the same without this highlight of being specifically selected to participate in this program. And we ran regression using process. And the result demonstrated that overall model was significant. I'm sorry that this was a recent study and I didn't have time to put the results like on a figure. So I'm just reporting the numbers here. So there was a significant effect of entitlement, the negative effect of entitlement on the likelihood that participants will keep the temperature at home below 90 degrees. There was also non-significant effect of the energy saving program time. However, what was the most of interest for us, that entitlement and program type interaction was significant. Participants were more likely to follow the suggestion to decrease the temperature at home when the program was framed as unique versus common. So these results suggest that when we frame a program as unique opportunity, this can mitigate the negative effect of entitlement on resource conservation effort. And we believe that this is a very interesting finding because it actually demonstrates how entitlement effect can be decreased. So to move to the conclusion, we demonstrate that entitlement is a strong predictor and negative predictor of a sustainable behavior. And we checked the consumption of various types of resources, such as water or energy. And we also think that a very interesting finding of the study is that we propose a potential strategy to mitigate negative effect of entitlement, but framing, for example, the conservation program as unique. And just to say a few words about the theoretical contribution. So first of all, we explore a psychological factor that influences sustainable consumption. So it's one of the factors that seems to be a very stable predictor of negative sustainable consumption. We also demonstrate the importance of discovering more psychological threats associated with citizens' resource consumption. And as for managerial implication, we demonstrate that more effective policies that encourage more frugal more frugal use of natural resources can be created. So, for example, if we inform consumers that they have been selected to join a unique program, this can be a way to nudge them to behave in a more sustainable way. So I finish my presentation here. So I leave my email here. So if you have any questions, suggestions, or if you're interested in any potential future collaboration, I would be happy to see interest in my work. And thank you so much for your attention.